At the bottom of the sea, very deep in the water, live the Sea People. It is a beautiful world, and the palace of the Sea King is the most beautiful thing you have ever seen. The Sea King had been a widower for many years, but lived with his old mother and his 6 princesses in the castle. The littlest mermaid was a wonderful girl. While her sisters were exuberant and happy, she dreamed of the world above the water. Her grandmother told her stories about the world of men, and the little mermaid could not wait to be allowed a visit to this mysterious world. On her 18th birthday, the time had come. She had heard many stories from all her older sisters, and now she could see it with her own eyes. On the waves, the little mermaid saw a huge ship bobbing up and down. There was the sound of laughter and singing. When she came a little closer, the little mermaid saw a breathtakingly beautiful prince. His black hair and black eyes were enchanting, and the little mermaid could not take her eyes off him. But in the distance, a storm approaching. The waves became higher and higher, and the ship could not withstand them. It broke in two and sank to the bottom of the sea. The mermaid knew that people cannot survive in water, so she searched for the prince. She found him and held his head above the water. She kept it there until the storm had passed and they reached the mainland. On the shore there was a monastery. Carefully the mermaid laid the prince on dry land and kissed him on the forehead. Then she hid and waited to see if anyone would find her prince. Not much later, some girls came running out of the monastery. One of them immediately saw the prince lying there and took care of him. Sadly, the mermaid returned home. At home, the little mermaid told the story to her big sisters. One of them knew where the prince's palace was and took the little mermaid there the next night. How she longed to be with him. Every night she returned to look at her prince. One day, the little mermaid plucked up all her courage and asked the sea witch for help. "I can turn your fishtail into legs, but it is very painful," the witch said. "In return for your beautiful voice, I will give you a potion, but every step you take will feel like stepping on a knife. Also, you can never become a mermaid again, and if the prince marries another, the next morning your heart will break and you will become foam on the water." The princess accepted it all. The mermaid swam to the prince's palace and went ashore. She drank the potion and fainted from the unbearable pain. The next morning, she woke up with the prince standing next to her. Of course, she couldn't say anything, but the prince took her into his castle anyway. He gave her the most beautiful clothes and allowed her to live with him. Every day he loved her more and more, but it never occurred to him to marry her. The prince told her that he only wanted to marry the girl who had found him on the beach. One day his parents made the prince meet a princess from another country. They hoped that he would want to marry her, but the little mermaid knew that he would only want to marry one girl. He would rather marry the mermaid than just any princess. So she went with him on the journey, full of confidence. At last, they were in the other country. They still had to wait for the princess. She was still on her way from the temple where she had been brought up for years. As soon as the prince saw her, he knew. This was the girl who had found him on the beach all those years ago. He would marry her. The little mermaid could already feel her heart breaking. The evening after the wedding there was a big party on a ship. Sadly, the little mermaid looked across the water, knowing that the next morning she would become foam on the sea. Then suddenly she saw her sisters coming up to the surface. They gave her a sharp knife and told her to kill the prince. Only then would she be able to live. But the little mermaid refused. She would never hurt her dear prince. Then she threw herself into the sea. But instead of becoming foam on the waves, she turned into a floating creature. "What am I?" she asked the others she saw floating around her. "We are the daughters of the air," they replied. "If we do good deeds for 300 years, we can get an immortal soul. You have already tried to do so much good that you can try to get it too. And that is exactly what the Little Mermaid was going to do. The Sea King rushed to see the Sea Witch, who laughed at him. She said there was only one way to save the Little Mermaid from her fate: if he would just hand over his scepter to her. With the scepter in her hand, the Sea Witch could rule the underworld kingdom. The Sea King took a deep breath and agreed, as he had no other option. The Sea Witch grabbed the scepter and laughed in glee. She rushed to the wedding ship, and now she had become a huge sea monster. Her tentacles were twisting out from her body like an octopus. The Little Mermaid knew she must protect the prince and even his new bride. So she took out the knife. Just then, one of the Sea Witch's tentacles reached out and lifted the Little Mermaid right off the ship. "This is the end for you," crowed the Sea Witch. Before the Little Mermaid knew, she was wrapped up in her tentacle. The Little Mermaid was holding the knife, and used it, and dove deep into the chest of the monster. The Sea Witch reeled back in pain, and she was freed. The guests on the ship started running around in fear. The prince shot at the monster, and the Sea Witch dropped down deep under the water. As she fell down, the Little Mermaid's voice returned. The princess the prince was marrying then shouted in a harsh, gruff voice, "What a lousy kingdom this is! Can't even have a proper wedding." The prince heard this and knew that she was not who he thought she was. Then the Little Mermaid started to sing, and the prince knew that the voice he remembered belonged to the very one he had grown to love. When the Sea King arrived, his scepter was floating in the sea, waiting for him. With a sweep of the arm, it was his again. "I see my daughter is in good hands," he said. The prince put his arms around the Little Mermaid. "Now I know it was you all along the way," the prince said. "Will you marry me?" the prince asked her. The Little Mermaid nodded in happiness, and a wedding on the ship took place after all.